Hey, what's up you guys? So today I want to discuss The Specials by Scott Westerfeld. So this is the third book in the Uglies trilogy, and I did really enjoy this book. I can't decide really where my favorite book in the series is. I think it might be Uglies, but it might also be this one. Pretties is probably my least favorite one in the series, but I did enjoy this one overall. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, and one of the biggest shining stars in this book for me was the overall development with Zane and with Tally. I thought that they developed really well overall throughout this book. I think this book probably had the best development for them. I also think the pacing of this book was a little bit better than it was in the rest of the series. I still don't think it was perfect. I do think certain moments were faster than I would have liked, certain moments were slower than I would have liked, but I do still think the pacing overall was a lot better in this book. So I really liked the Zane scenes in the book. I feel like all of the Zane scenes were really good, and they were really concise, and they were really able to show his development and also Tally's development and how being special had really affected her. And I really liked that, and I liked how that really showed how they both grew and how they were able to kind of grow separately but also together in this book, even though they weren't necessarily together very much in this book. As I said, the pacing was better in this book, but I do think certain moments were faster than I would have liked, which is very different from the other two books where a lot of the moments were slower than I would have liked. And with this book especially, the end I felt was just way too rushed for me, and so that's kind of where the overall pacing of the book fell apart. But the beginning was pretty on point. The middle was a little tad slow, but it was not nearly as bad as it was with the other books. I also liked how we got a little bit of some development with David. We got to see some scenes with him. We got to see him do a little bit more, even if it wasn't necessarily a lot, and I wish that we had gotten more, but I did like seeing that in comparison with some of the other books in the series where I don't feel like we saw a lot of development. I really liked seeing how the Specials thought differently and operated differently than the rest of the people, because that was something that was kind of not really well described in the other books, was kind of how the Specials thought, because we knew what Pretties thought. We knew how that made them all bubbly, and we knew how normal people think because we're all normal people. But we didn't quite know what made the Specials so different, and why would making Tally a special take away her drive to help out David. And so I liked seeing that, and I liked how that kind of developed, how that happened, because I really wasn't sure how making her special was going to change her, and so I liked seeing how it changed her. I also really liked how this book kind of discussed how it is easier to be a member of a group than it is to kind of think things on your own, because when you are a member of the group, it is a lot easier to kind of make bad decisions because you can do it under the guise of it being a group decision. And so I think that's what kind of was going on here, especially with Tally and with Shay, is they were able to, under the guise of being members of this group, make decisions that were not nice decisions, and you could always just blame it on someone else, or you could blame it on the group, and you don't have to blame it on individual people. It's kind of like how people group together and are able to support things that aren't good, but they can do it as a group because it's not them, it's the other people in the group. So I just think that that is an interesting discussion, and I really like that discussion. So now let's talk about some of the stuff that I don't like as much. I didn't like people being referred to as random. That's just a little pet peeve of mine. People aren't random. If there's one thing you really know in math, it's that true randomness really doesn't exist. Like, it's really hard to find true randomness in the world because people, we really aren't random. We have favorite numbers, you know? If you're gonna like go through and you're gonna try to come up with a random sequence in your head, there's going to be numbers that are going to pop up more because you have numbers that are like more important in your head and they just come to mind. So people just like aren't that random. You should never use a person as like your source for randomness. You should always like use an actual random process because that's just not random. I also felt like Shay was missing scenes again. There are so many moments that I felt like it would have really benefited from this being a dual perspective with Tally and Shay. I honestly think that that would have been a really good way for this series to go instead of the way that it did. I think it would have made it so much more interesting to have both of them, and it would have helped Shay's development so much more if we had seen more scenes from her. I also really felt like this book was missing development for Dr. Cable. She was really underdeveloped, and she was really just disappointing in this book. I mean, I didn't expect what happened with her to really happen, and I didn't like how it happened either. And I just feel like she's weird. She doesn't make sense to me, and it's because we didn't get enough scenes with her. We literally only had like scenes where she was being like kind of creepy, and that's kind of all we got from her until we got like the last scene with her where she really changed and like it didn't make any sense. So I didn't like that. As I said before, the end just happened too quickly. I did not like that. It's kind of like with Uglies, where I thought the end happened a little bit too quickly there too, because there was not really any planning involved, and this is kind of the same way. There wasn't any planning involved, and I don't like that. It makes it feel too convenient. It makes it feel like it shouldn't have worked, so that was another pet peeve. So that was my non-spoiler thoughts of specials, so now I'm gonna launch into my spoilery section. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I would leave now, but if you don't really care, you can stick around. Let's get into it. So the first scene I wanted to discuss was Zane's death. I really liked how Zane's death impacted Tally. I did not like how lackluster it was, but I did like it overall as far as Tally's development, and I think that for her it was more important for her development than it was for us to have like some epic Zane death scene. But I did like that he died. I like when authors are willing to go there, so I did like that overall. I feel like I sound like a psychopath, but it's fine. And I didn't really cry or anything over him dying. It wasn't like necessarily the most impactful death ever because of how it was written and how kind of quick it was, but I did like that it happened, and I like that Tally is now able to kind of be with David, kind of, and see where that goes. Even though we don't really get a lot of that, I just like that we kind of have a little bit of a bow on that whole storyline. Next, I wanted to talk about the armory being destroyed in the beginning, and I thought this was such a perfect whole thing going on. The whole sequence of the armory being destroyed was so perfect. It went by like the perfect speed pacing-wise, and I loved how Shay and Tally were working together, and I loved seeing how they like destroyed the whole thing, and I loved the little random middle-aged pretty that was there, and I just thought that that was so funny. I thought that it was just such a fun, like, badass little sequence that we got in here. So definitely love that scene. The war starting was something that I thought happened way too quickly. Like, I did not think that it was great how it was done. Like, I would have liked that to have taken a little bit more time for us to see people actually like prepare for it, and for it not just to be like one random building being destroyed and that being called a war. Like, I wished it would have been a little bit more upscaled. I wish it would have been a little bit more carnage. I wish that there would have been a little bit more going on. I wish that it would have been a little bit messy, and I understand that for this society that was kind of messy, but I just wish it had been messier. I wish that we had seen more stuff go down. I wish that it wasn't just what it was and so underwhelming. So Shay's development overall, I really liked how she developed. I just wish that we got to see it happen, you know? Like, she went from being a special to not being a special so quickly, and I wish that we had seen her come to that conclusion, her realizing that she shouldn't be a special anymore, and her realizing that it was wrong, and her realizing that she was wrong. Like, I would have liked that so much more. And I would have liked seeing her and Tally kind of develop into being better friends, because it feels like they became friends for no reason at the end, because they at this point had really betrayed each other and backstabbed each other in all the wrong ways. And so the fact that they were able to come back together and just be like, let's be friends, I was like, could we have seen a little bit more development there? Could we have seen them bond a little bit more? Could we have given them like a moment to bond over that wasn't just like, building's about to be destroyed? Like, I would have liked something more there. I would have liked a little bit more of a fight there. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was when Tally entered the new city, and I really loved it, and I loved seeing how everyone was so different. It felt kind of like Star Wars-y to me with the city. It kind of felt like walking into like Coruscant or whatever, and so everyone was just weird and wild and wacky, and I loved it, and I thought that it was so fun, and I loved how Tally was just so confused by it all, and how she felt so above it all, but also how like overwhelmed she was with it. And I loved how she ran into the other special there, I think his name was Fausto, how he wound up ambushing her, and it was just fantastic. I thought that she was just really going through a lot at that moment, and she did not realize how wrong she was, and I loved when she did start to realize it, and I just loved the new city. I thought that it was such a fun place to be. I also really loved when we saw Zane for the first time in this book, because when they were looking down at the building and they saw that like no one was moving, I literally thought there was no one in the room. I was just like, they all left their rings in there. But no, Zane was in there and he had like a collar, and I was like, oh, that's not good. But I loved it, and I loved seeing Zane. I loved Tally, and I loved how she reacted to seeing Zane. I loved how she felt so above him, and she couldn't take his weakness, and I loved it. I just ate that up because it really showed how she had changed. I did not like how it felt so similar to with David, where as soon as she saw him again, she was just like done with him, but I did like overall how we saw her thinking change, but I was a little disappointed by how it felt like she had just fallen out of love with him again, like with David, but she also kind of didn't. So I feel like the way in which she was reintroduced to Zane and David in the series was a little messed up. Like, we should have had some of that residual feeling in there. We should have had like a disconnect between her thinking and her feeling, and I feel like that's what we were missing, was that disconnect, because it didn't feel like it was disconnected. It felt like she was feeling that they weren't good enough for her anymore, and so I didn't like that. I did not like that at all. And lastly, I wanted to talk about Andrew Simpson Smith again, and he was so underdeveloped in this book. Like, can we stop just throwing this random character in this series for no reason? Like, he was in here for no reason. They could have used anyone else, and it would have been just the same. Like, he was here for nothing, and I didn't like it. Like, don't underuse a character like this, please, authors. But it was just so frustrating that he was so underused again. Like, one scene, that was all we got. Like, I want development with that character. I want to see him grow. I want to see him change. But he hasn't. He's still just a weird tribal guy. Like, let's see him realize that his worldview is wrong. Other than, you know, the pretties not being gods, because that's obvious. And that's something that he can quickly realize. Like, let's see him change how he thinks about anything, about how he thinks about, you know, the vengeance thing that was going on. Let's see how he changes with that. Like, let's not see how he just helps random people. That's boring. Give me some development. So anyways, that was my thoughts on Specials by Scott Westerfeld. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment, all of that jazz. I post videos on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, so I will see you in my next one. Bye!